When I married into Mark's family, I had no idea the level of hostility I'd be dealing with from his mother. Mill demanded that once I became Mark's wife, I should give up my career entirely, and later, she went as far as to publicly accuse me of having a miscarriage at her own 25th anniversary party, no less. That night, my father-in-law Phil finally had enough and told her, in front of the entire room, that he was divorcing her. Mark and I have been living together for almost 8 years now, and for the most part, we've had a solid, happy marriage. The trouble has never been between us, it's always come from his side of the family. From the moment we got engaged, Mill made it clear she had it out for me. My father-in-law, on the other hand, was kind but spineless, letting her walk all over him while he mostly stayed quiet in the background. One of the biggest issues was the difference in our upbringings. Mark grew up in a well-off household, while I came from a pretty average, middle-class family. To his mom, that was apparently enough reason to look down on me. She never missed a chance to nitpick, commenting on my clothes, my shoes, even how I presented myself. Before meeting her, I had never been self-conscious about my appearance, but she pushed me to a point where I started buying expensive outfits just so she wouldn't look at me with that patronizing pity. I'll never forget the time I wore a white blouse I had put on a month earlier. The moment she noticed, she smirked and said that wealthy people don't repeat clothes, and that it was embarrassing for me to do so. Mark tried to shut her down, but she always timed these remarks when other people were around, just so I turned red with shame. Sometimes she even dragged me out shopping and bought clothes she liked but I hated, and I'd still smile, thank her, and accept them because I was desperate to keep the peace. I honestly thought that if I kept showing gratitude and kindness, eventually she'd come around. But the longer I knew her, the clearer it became that her generosity always came with strings attached. When Mark and I had only been dating for less than a year, I landed a great job at a pharmaceutical company. It paid well enough that I was able to upgrade my lifestyle, and Mark was proud of me. His mom? Not so much. She started calling and texting me, demanding to know exactly what I made. Her reasoning was ridiculous. According to her, the women in their family were supposed to earn less than their husbands. I told her flat out that in my field, it was only a matter of time before I'd be out earning Mark, and that was just reality. She didn't like that one bit. She told me I could play career woman for now, but once I married Mark, I'd have to quit or else people would gossip that he couldn't provide. I laughed in her face, because this wasn't the 1950s, and Mark never once had an issue with me working. When I told Mark about her behavior, he was furious. He never shared what he said to her, but soon after, Mill called me, screaming and crying, accusing me of driving a wedge between her and her son. She even went so far as to call me the devil and insisted she'd never let Mark marry a woman like me. That was my first real red flag. I blocked her after that call because I was exhausted with her constant toxicity. Of course, Mark and I didn't split up, but it definitely opened my eyes to the kind of mother he had grown up with. Even after that, I couldn't avoid her completely. Whenever there were family events, she was there, and her behavior never changed. She'd pretend I didn't exist, ignoring me while making a big show of hugging Mark and asking him about his day. If Mark tried to bring me into the conversation, she'd cut him off or change the subject like I wasn't standing right there. Over time, I noticed her favorite tactic was playing the sick and frail card. She'd complain about her health, even though nothing was wrong with her, just to guilt Mark into giving her extra attention. It was all manipulation. When Mark finally proposed after years of dating, we threw an engagement party and invited both our families. My side was overjoyed, but his parents showed up with long faces. Mill looked even more bitter when she spotted the ring on my hand. She whispered to Mark that it was disrespectful for him to buy me a diamond larger than the one she had gotten from Phil. My father-in-law tried to calm her down, but she made a scene anyway, saying Mark never did anything right for her but was bending over backward for this poor girl. Her behavior at our engagement party had me boiling inside, so I finally stood up for myself. I told her flat out that if she couldn't respect me, then she needed to leave. The shock on her face was almost satisfying, but I wasn't about to let her ruin one of the happiest days of my life in front of my entire family. My father-in-law, bless him, ended up escorting her out while she shouted Mark's name like a banshee. Mark stayed by my side, though, making it clear whose team he was on. Later that night, she called Mark and half-heartedly apologized, claiming she'd been too drunk, even though everyone knew she barely touched a glass of wine. Still, since she offered an apology to both of us, we decided to let it go and move forward. When the wedding planning kicked in, Mill insisted she be included in my dress shopping, saying it was something she'd always dreamed of doing. At that point, my patience with her was running on fumes, but she was Mark's mother, so I couldn't exactly slam the door in her face. I reluctantly agreed and warned my mom and cousin to brace themselves because I knew she'd try to pull something. Sure enough, right on cue, she trashed every dress I tried on. She said sophisticated women didn't wear lace and demanded I pick a plain, traditional white gown instead. I stood my ground, and my mom cut in, telling her I wasn't her daughter and she had no say. Mill got huffy and sat in the corner sulking with her arms crossed like a pouting child. Even after I picked my dream dress and we paid for it, she couldn't resist one last jab. She smirked and told me she was glad I'd chosen it because it made my arms look fat, then actually giggled. That was the final straw for my mom, who snapped and let her have it, calling out her childish, mean-spirited behavior. I was holding back tears because who wants to hear something like that about their wedding dress? And for the record, I'm not even overweight, so it wasn't just cruel, it was nonsensical. I'd had enough. I told her she could figure out her own ride home because there was no way I was sitting in a car with her for another hour while she insulted me. She panicked, yelling that I couldn't just abandon her, but that's exactly what I did. On the drive back, Mark called me in a fury. Apparently, his mother had phoned him crying, claiming I'd stranded her on purpose. He immediately started scolding me without even hearing my side. I told him I'd explain once I got home, but he kept pressing me, so my mom, who could hear everything since the call was on speaker, jumped in. She calmly laid out every awful thing Mill had done that day, step by step, and asked Mark point-blank if that sounded like the behavior of a respectable adult. He was embarrassed, realizing he hadn't gotten the whole story. When he came home later, he apologized and admitted he only panicked because he thought his poor old mom had been left alone. I told him I never would have ditched her if she hadn't been vile the entire day. Mark hugged me, told me he understood, and even said he'd support me if I wanted to uninvite her from the wedding. Honestly, I wanted to more than anything, but I was worried my father-in-law would stay home too if she wasn't allowed. And I couldn't bear the thought of Mark's wedding happening without either of his parents there, it just felt too cruel. So instead, we spoke to my father-in-law privately and told him that if Mill acted up on the big day, it would be his job to remove her. He agreed, and I genuinely felt bad for the poor man, stuck dealing with her around the clock. To my surprise, Mill behaved herself at the wedding, at least on the surface. She spent the whole day bragging about how extravagant the celebration was, as if she and her husband had paid for it. The truth was, every penny came from our savings. A lot of Mark's extended family assumed his parents had footed the bill, since she always flaunted their wealth. But during the toast, my father-in-law shut that down immediately. He proudly announced that they hadn't paid a dime, and that everything was the result of our hard work. He even praised me, calling me accomplished and saying he never thought his son would land someone as intelligent as me. The guests applauded, but Mill's face soured so badly I thought she'd explode. Later, during the father-daughter dance, my dad and I shared a sweet moment while everyone clapped. Mark was about to step in when Mill rushed over, insisting she had to be the first woman to dance with her baby boy. Mark gave in, and she got her moment. I brushed it off, determined not to let her ruin the night. Eventually, she even came up to me and offered her version of a compliment. With a smug little smile, she said, "I was wrong. I don't think your arms look that fat in this dress." Then she walked away like it was nothing. I wanted to scream, but I bit my tongue and focused on enjoying the night. We all drank, danced, and celebrated into the early hours. The next morning, though, I woke up to several texts from her. My jaw dropped as I read them. She claimed I had embarrassed her all night and told me I needed to do better if I wanted to be part of her family. I was a little hungover, but I remembered everything clearly, so I called my parents just to double-check. They assured me I hadn't done a thing wrong, everyone had been laughing and having a great time. When Mark woke up, I showed him the messages. He shrugged and told me to ignore them. That made me suspicious, so I pressed him, asking what she meant. That's when he admitted she'd spent the entire night whispering in his ear about me. She told him I was dancing too much with my cousins, accused me of being wild, and even said he needed to control me now that I was his wife. Mark laughed it off, saying he ignored her nonsense and I should too. But I was deeply offended. The idea that she'd tell him to rein me in, as if I were some out-of-control teenager, was disgusting. I wanted to confront her immediately, but since we were leaving for our honeymoon, I decided to shelve it for the time being. The honeymoon itself was amazing, we relaxed, traveled, and had an incredible time together. But the very day we got back, Mill called me out of the blue. She acted overly sweet, asking how the honeymoon went. It was so unusual for her to call me directly that I instantly felt something was off. When I brought up the cruel things she'd said to Mark during the wedding, she brushed it off, claiming she hadn't meant any harm. Then, without missing a beat, she started prying into intimate details about the honeymoon, asking if we'd had plenty of alone time. I cut her off and told her our honeymoon wasn't her business, but she kept pressing, saying she just wanted to know if she was going to be a grandmother soon. I nearly gagged. First of all, we'd only been married a week. Second, the way she said it made me feel like she didn't see me as a wife, but as some sort of breeding machine for her dream grandchild. The thing is, Mark and I had already made a big decision long before we even got engaged. We didn't want kids. It wasn't something we came to lightly, and it wasn't out of any dislike for children. We just knew raising kids wasn't the life we wanted for ourselves. We never bothered to spell it out for our parents, because frankly, it was none of their business. That didn't stop Mill from lecturing me about my ticking biological clock every chance she got. She'd go on about how I needed to get pregnant as quickly as possible because these were my best years. I was cringing so hard just listening to her, and then she crossed an even more disturbing line. She suggested loud and clear that Mark and I should stop using condoms. I shut that down immediately. It was gross, inappropriate, and not a topic she had any right to bring up. When I told Mark, he was furious. He called her right then and there and gave her a piece of his mind. He also went ahead and told her the truth, that we had no plans to ever have kids. Her reaction was exactly what we expected. She screamed into the phone like we'd just killed her dog, threatening that if Mark didn't give her a grandchild, she'd cut him out of her will. Mark laughed and reminded her she didn't even have assets to leave, thanks to the prenup she signed with his dad. That only made her angrier. She turned her rage on me, screaming that it was all my fault. According to her, my only purpose as a wife was to give her son a child, and since I wasn't doing that, I was faulty. Hearing her call me that felt like being punched in the stomach. Mark tried to calm her down, but she doubled down, accusing us of destroying her lifelong dream. She even had the nerve to ask why we'd gotten married at all if we weren't going to produce children. That was the moment Mark finally snapped. He told her he was done, that she was never going to speak to me that way again, and that after years of constant disrespect, he was cutting her out of his life. He told her she was no longer welcome in our home or in our lives, and if she ever showed up, he'd call the police and let the whole neighborhood watch her get dragged off. Knowing how much she cared about appearances, that threat hit her where it hurt. From that point on, we stuck to our word, no contact. My father-in-law did try once to play mediator, but after Mark explained everything, he sided with us completely. Over time, he became close with my parents, and whenever we got together, Mill was not invited. To her credit, she respected the boundary and kept her distance. Then, last December, something we never expected happened. I got pregnant by accident. It shocked us both, especially since having children was never part of the plan. But we were in a good place in our lives, and after the initial shock wore off, we decided to embrace it. Family and friends congratulated us, and even Mill sent flowers with a handwritten letter. She claimed she had gone to therapy, reflected on her past, and changed. I wasn't buying it, so I never responded. 2 months later, my world fell apart. In the middle of the night, I woke up covered in blood. I froze, panicked, and woke Mark up in tears. He rushed me to the hospital, where we were told we had lost the baby. It crushed us. Even though we hadn't planned for this child, we already loved that little life growing inside me. We would have given our baby everything. Losing it left a hole I didn't know how to fill. I sank into grief. I barely left my bed for days. My mom stayed with us, making sure I wasn't alone, while Mark did everything he could to hold me together. His dad and some family members checked in constantly, showing support. My body ached, my heart felt shattered, and I cried until I had no tears left. Slowly, with Mark by my side, I started to feel just a little bit better. Then came another family event, Phil and Mill's 25th wedding anniversary. It was a big milestone, and everyone was invited. Honestly, neither of us wanted to go. The miscarriage was still raw, and I couldn't bear the thought of fielding questions or hearing sympathy from people who didn't understand. But my father-in-law begged us. He said he wanted us there, that we needed a night to relax and be with family. Against our better judgment, we agreed. Seeing Mill again after years was surreal. She ran straight to Mark, hugging him like she'd missed him for decades. When it came to me, though, she was ice cold, as expected. I didn't care, I just found a seat and kept to myself. Dinner went as usual, with relatives sharing life updates. Then one of Mark's cousins announced she was pregnant. Everyone cheered and congratulated her, but I felt my stomach twist painfully. That's when Mill decided to make the moment about herself. She grabbed a microphone, raised her glass, and started a toast. She spoke about how grateful she was to be surrounded by family and how nothing brought her more joy than seeing new life being brought into the world. She congratulated the cousin, then, without warning, turned the knife. She said while some women were blessed to carry little bundles of joy, others were out there killing babies. And then, she looked straight at me. I froze. Mark froze. The room went silent. She had just publicly accused me of intentionally causing my miscarriage. I couldn't believe anyone could be that cruel. Mill didn't stop there. She kept going, her voice loud and sharp, saying Mark had settled for someone like me. She claimed she'd only tolerated our marriage because she thought at the very least I'd give her grandchildren, and now, since I couldn't even do that, I was worthless. She sneered that I was nothing more than a trophy wife, announced she couldn't wait for Mark to divorce me, and even said no one would have to see me at her next anniversary party. Then she raised her glass, downed it like she was giving a victory speech, and smiled. The room was dead silent. Mark finally broke it, asking her what the hell she thought she was doing. They erupted into a screaming match, her blaming me for everything, him defending me as best he could. I sat there shaking, overwhelmed, until I couldn't hold it in anymore and just burst into tears. My chest ached, my throat burned, and I felt completely humiliated. Instead of backing off, she mocked me, saying I should quit the act because no one would believe my sob story. That's when something unexpected happened. Phil, my father-in-law, who had been sitting quietly through the chaos, stood up. He raised his hands and asked everyone to calm down. He said he needed to get something off his chest. Then he took the mic and, with a steady voice, announced that he was done. After 25 years, he was finished with the marriage. He said there wouldn't be another anniversary celebration because he no longer wanted to be married to Mill. The look on her face was priceless, like she'd been smacked with a brick wall. He explained that he had stayed all those years only because he wanted Mark to have a stable example and didn't want to tear the family apart. But after watching her cruelty, especially that night, he realized he was too old to keep putting himself through her drama. He told the guests to enjoy the food, loosened his tie, and walked out into the night. Mill screamed after him, demanding he come back, but he ignored her. Then she turned on me, insisting that I had ruined everything. Mark didn't let that slide. He told her it was all her own fault, and he was glad his dad was finally free from her. That must have hit her hard, because she went quiet, muttered that she was leaving, and stormed out. A few relatives checked in on me afterward, worried. Even Mark's pregnant cousin, the one Mill had congratulated, hugged me tightly. It helped a little. Since that night, Phil has been staying with us. He refuses to go back, no matter how many times Mill calls him. He told us he's already planning to meet with a divorce lawyer. Still, I couldn't shake the guilt. Part of me felt responsible for their breakup, like my presence had pushed everything over the edge. Was I really to blame for their marriage falling apart? The post I made about it blew up. So many people reached out with their own horror stories about toxic mothers-in-law, and I was floored. I can't imagine how any parent could treat their child's spouse the way Mill treated me. And I need to make one thing clear: Mark has been my rock. Don't bash him. He stood up for me whenever he could. It's not easy growing up with an overbearing, manipulative parent. I was lucky enough to be raised by loving parents, but he wasn't, and he's done his best to shield me. The outpouring of support from people who shared their experiences with miscarriage meant a lot too. Reading those stories broke my heart, but it reminded me I wasn't alone. I had been carrying so much guilt, feeling like I'd failed to protect the baby. But deep down I knew it wasn't my fault. I realized I needed therapy, and I joined online groups where other women talked openly about their losses. It helped me feel seen. A couple of months later, Phil officially served Mill with divorce papers. He's been living with us, and honestly, he's the best houseguest anyone could ask for. He cracks jokes like Mark does, and he loves to cook. Some nights I come home from work to a full meal waiting. I can't understand how Mill let such a good man slip away. When he and Mark served her the papers, she refused to look at them. She screamed that they had no right, that everything she'd said about me was only because she wanted the best for the family. Mark ignored her, helped his dad pack his things, and when she started smashing things around the house, Phil calmly threatened to call the police. That shut her up quick, since it was his house to begin with. After that party, most of the family cut her off too. Everyone had seen enough. They knew her trophy wife comment was nonsense because I have my own career and make a good living. They sympathized with me about the miscarriage and were disgusted by how she had used it against me. She ended up alone, with no friends or family left on her side. Even my own parents confronted her, warning that if she kept harassing or defaming me, they'd pursue legal action. And believe me, my mom wasn't bluffing. 8 months later, Phil is finally a free man. Thanks to the prenup, she didn't get her hands on much. He let her keep the joint account and the car just to get it over with, but the house was his before the marriage, and she couldn't touch it. From what Mark's heard, she's crashing at a cousin's place while she looks for something more affordable. Honestly, she has enough to live comfortably on her own if she stops playing the victim. As for us, we're doing well. Mill hasn't been around, aside from occasionally trying to spin her own version of events to anyone who'll listen. Let her. We don't care anymore. Mark and I both started therapy, separately and together, and it's been healing. I've made new friends who get me, our careers are moving forward, and we've built a home filled with peace instead of chaos. For the first time in years, I feel like we're finally free.